Hello, friends. Hello, America. Welcome to Your Leo Nation. Your Leo Nation is where we believe in the rule of law, a civil society, self-responsibility, and we unabashedly support the men and women who do the job to ensure that civil society. I am your host, the Chief Mark Garrett. I am once again so excited to be here, as I always am. We seem to keep knocking it out of the park with amazing guests. Today is just no exception. We have today a State Representative Tom Lackey, California, State Representative Tom Lackey. Done a great job for the people of California, continues to do it. Tom, thank you so much for being here today, and it's a privilege.
Well, thank you. It's exciting to be here and join you today.
Thanks so much. We'll talk a little bit about your background, but I'll go ahead and kick it off a little bit here. Tom and I actually worked, well, not actually physically together in the same station ever, but we were actually on the California Highway Patrol at the same time. Tom a little before me and retired a little before me. Looks younger than me, but he came on before I did. So we actually worked in the same law enforcement agency for a number of years. Tom, I believe he did 28 years at the California Highway Patrol, retires as a sergeant. And this is a gentleman who today represents the people of California in the legislative sense, and at one time was an executive in the law enforcement role. So he's seen it from both sides, and I think is as qualified as anybody to talk about a civil society and the rule of law. So we are glad to have him today. Tom, there was something, and you and I briefly spoke about this, getting ready for the podcast, something that caught my attention a little while back. It's still going through the mill of the state legislature. And that is SV, or Senate Bill 1273, also known as Eliminating Unnecessary Police Interaction in Schools. And the person who authored this so-called bill is State Senator Stephen Bradford. Now, just so you know, Tom, I've dealt with this character when I was a chief, assistant chief, and captain here in Los Angeles, because he's from Southern California. And I'm going to let you, kind of take it away just right now about Stephen Bradford, and you can talk about this, and we'll kind of get into the meat and potatoes, or the weeds, more accurately, of this bill. So, what do you want to tell us about Stephen Bradford?
Well, he's actually a very nice person with a very lopsided view of public safety in general. He happens to be the chair on the Senate side of the Public Safety Committee, which is really quite ironic, because quite frankly, public safety is not really their interest. It's more like inmate safety that they're focused on. They like to protect the arrested, and to some degree, I'm all about being fair to the arrested, but in the same right, I also believe that justice calls for remedy, and remedy means usually removing them from society for a period of time, so that society can relax, and maybe that they can get their mind in order and their perspective in order. But nonetheless, Mr. Bradford is missing the mark on so many fronts. It's unfortunate because his life experience must be filled with all sorts of negative encounters with law enforcement, because he actually despises law enforcement. He would claim to the contrary, but it is a fact. And he also sees a lot of things through a racial lens. And I do believe that we need to be sensitive when we consider these perspectives, because I do believe that there are some things we need to do to improve race relations from all sides. But nonetheless, when there's no sense of balance, we get imbalanced policy. And we are the lawmakers, and we are to consider all aspects of an issue before we take action. And his particular bill that you are focusing on is absolutely to the point of absurd, in all truth. It is very counterintuitive to any kind of justice.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Let me just share with the audience some tidbits, some pieces from Mr. Bradford's bill that he authored, and you touched on the the racial polarization. That's my word. I think you were alluding to that. Um, the lens sometimes that he sees things through. Quite frankly, again, I know Stephen Bradford and get along. Like you said, we got along very well.
He's a good
But
golfer.
well, listen, everybody's a better golfer than I am. I
Yeah,
I
me
could
too.
barely caddy. Yeah. So, um, but when it comes to public policy, being a nice guy is not the end game. It's doing what's right for society. It's doing what's right for the individual. It's doing what's right for the rule of law and the civil society. To go back to some of our intro points here that we make every time we come on the air. This is what it comes down to. It's not about feeling good. It's not about retribution. It's not about, payback from past evils that are absolutely real. It's about what we do now to keep people safe, to hold people accountable, to encourage people to engage in self responsibility and to see everybody as equals, which I know is a really, really bad thing to wish for now because we have to focus on equity, not equality. And
Well,
I'm just
let
not
me
one of
just
those.
remind you something though, that I wish that behavior was committed in an equitable manner, right? That would make it easy. But unfortunately, that's not real. And so when they try to redirect attention away from the behavior and on the accuser, which is quite successful, I mean, they do it all the time and they do it quite successfully. It misses the mark. It misses the mark on what's really in the interest of justice. And I, I've been the vice chair on the assembly side. He's on the Senate side, and I'm on the assembly side uh, of the public safety committee. And my goodness, if you would have to sit in my seat and listen to what I listen to routinely, and we're probably one of the most aggressive legislative committees because there's a lot of public safety perspectives that get passed every year, and in my opinion, that lead to a more dangerous society and not a more safe society. But the focus is they try to make the perpetrators be the victim, and they're quite skilled in doing that. And really is an injustice to what we all deserve, which is a safer society.
Well, it's really interesting that you focus on that about making really the perpetrator the victims and the law enforcers, the criminals. I've told people for a while since I've been looking at this bill, go to the mill, which of course you voted against, and of course, so proud of you. Not surprised, but proud of you. But I tell people, and we'll get into the text of this and some quote unquote background on it. But the way I see this is a very poorly veiled attack on law enforcement. It may look like otherwise. It may look like, hey, we're trying to protect the innocent people. We're trying to keep people from being unfairly targeted. That's not it. That is not it. This is an attack on law enforcement. In law enforcement, this is an attempt to neuter law enforcement. This is an attempt to separate the law enforcers from the law violators.
Hey,
By
if I could
which,
interrupt you just real quickly,
yeah,
because
please do.
you used the word veiled. I don't even think it's that veiled. I think it's very
Yeah, I said
boldly
poorly unveiled.
an affront. And as a matter of fact, I confronted him in when it was on the assembly side with this issue, that it was an attack against law enforcement, because there's a lot of because he wants to remove law enforcement from campuses altogether. And I told him that there's actually learning opportunities there that can actually build trust back. And that's when he bounced back and accused the entire law enforcement profession to fall under the same kind of, I don't know, poor judgment that was exercised in Uvalde, and saying that, this is what happens. You have a bunch of cowards with guns and badges waiting outside while young children are being murdered. And I have to tell you, it took about everything I had to keep my mouth in control. I was so infuriated by that and so insulted. But that's the place he comes from.
It's a sick comparison. It's not even a good comparison. I mean, it's an evil comparison. Listen, I think you and I are on the same page about Uvalde, which is a whole different podcast and a whole different encyclopedia.
It was an embarrassment.
That
I mean, put
it
it
was an
mildly.
embarrassment to law enforcement. Yes, to put it mildly, you're absolutely right. But to compare that to officers responding to these calls on campuses. And by the way, with that kind of segue, let me read a summary and a little bit of background so our audience knows exactly what you're dealing with there. And not just this bill, but this bill to me kind of exemplifies
It
craziness,
does. No, it's a good one.
so absurdity of what's going on. Now listen to this. So here's a summary. SB Senate Bill 1273 will eliminate the mandatory requirement that schools notify law enforcement for student behavior categorized as an assault or minor possession of cannabis or alcohol, and protect students from unnecessary contact with criminal justice system. Now, again, I'm just reading the summary here for time's sake, and we can dive deeper into it. But these assaults, disruption of public proceedings, possession of certain weapons. I believe that actually firearms are exempt from the proposal, I
They are.
believe. But weapons, yeah. So there's a ton more stuff in here that, look, when you and I, we're about 4 years apart in age. So let's say we're the same age as far as public schools and schools. We grew up in the 60s and 70s and one public school, that the things we're talking about that they don't want cops to respond to or get notified of. I mean, it's like a twilight zone. That, can you imagine some kid having weed or some kid assaulting a teacher and not having a law enforcement respond? Absolutely crazy. So let me go back to the background. This comes from Bradford's own website. Background: decades of research show the long-term harm to young people of even minimal contact with the juvenile or criminal justice systems. Once students make contact with these systems, they are less likely to graduate high school and more likely to wind up in jail or prison. Now, and it goes on, we can talk about more, but the idea, the notion that cops responding, like you said earlier, Tom, responding to a school at the request of a teacher or administrator based on the behavior of a child, somehow is turned around, that the cops responding is causing the child to behave in an unacceptable way. This is something that anybody with two brain cells would understand the absurdity and the backward nature of this kind of statement.
Yeah, I mean, we all have heard the statement that is encouraged nationwide about the importance it is to speak up and when you see something, to say something. And this is just to the contrary. This is see something, say nothing. And that's what I told Bradford to his face. And that's when he fired back with Uvalde. So he was very, very irritated by, and I meant not to insult him. I meant to just show the absurdity of this particular policy, because, that it also shows how they can twist statistics, because they make it sound like the contact was the reason for these negative outcomes. It's because the behavior progressed and did not diminish that has those negative outcomes. Behavior gets dismissed and excused at every turn. At every turn, they make it sound like because if you don't have a lot of income, that you're turned to crime. And I think that that's an insult to people who have minimal income. My family came from very, very little, and my dad came from abject poverty. And he would be extremely insulted if they made that comparison that poor people are relegated to criminal conduct, because they are not. Well, I would tell you this, that I think that when you do have a depressed neighborhood, that there's dysfunction and there's greater challenge for sure. But to try to equate the fact that law enforcement is responding to an incident and blaming future misconduct by an individual because of that response goes beyond reason. And it goes to show you how this legislature in majority actually thinks. And it's very disturbing, truthfully.
Yeah, it is disturbing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a super
It is.
majority of Democrats,
Mhm.
correct? And so Republicans like you are warriors because you know what you're up
Mhm.
against, electoral wise, numbers wise, but you're still doing the right thing and hanging your rear end out there to do everything you can to make it safer for us. The next paragraph of this background is also something that you touched on really off the top of the show about the racial aspect of this as far as Bradford's concerned. And also, you know, what you said about your father coming from absolute poverty, it's something else that you and I have common besides the California habit patrol and besides our really devotion to the rule of law. My dad grew up poor, black, in the Depression, in the Deep South. And his mother was murdered when she was 37 years old. His father was on the road. And people have listened to the podcast have probably heard the story before. But to summarize, my father was, again, black, dirt poor, in the Depression, in the Deep South. My father was literally 40. He was the one who rode in the back of the bus. That was my father. It's not a history book. And he served in World War II. Got married when he was 21 years old, 60 years of marriage the day he died, raised 5 kids, 4 good ones and me, and put 4 of his 5 kids through college, had owned 3 homes before he died on a 7th grade education under those circumstances. I think to kind of sum up what you said a minute ago about the cause effect, I'm a big believer, and quite frankly, Tom, the numbers show it, the stats show it, history shows it that poverty does not cause crime, but crime most certainly causes
Well said.
poverty. This is what happens. And so when we have, quite frankly, and again, I've gotten along with Stephen Bradford over here. I've done a lot of functions. We've emceed events together, but we got to call it out as it is. And this to me is race baiting when you interject something like this. Next paragraph. Our existing system has led to alarming disparities in the type of students who are most likely to suffer these harms. Guess what's coming next? Black students, Latinx or Latinx, sorry, I never learned how to pronounce it correctly and never will. Students of color, and students with disabilities are disproportionately referred to law enforcement, cited, and arrested. Now, I got to say right now, I guess if you let's look at the raw numbers, I guess you can fabricate or make the argument that more black kids are referred to law enforcement. Maybe my guess is, quite frankly, that maybe more juveniles, black juveniles, are committing crime, like you said earlier on. And so, I mean, that's what's happening. But my God, students with disabilities get referred to law enforcement at a higher rate than students without disabilities. This is a new one on me. I think you're pulling all the stops on this. It, this is this is nothing but a way to excuse bad behavior and nothing but a way to vilify cops in the law enforcement profession. So I applaud you on what you're doing so far. There's more to this. I want to turn it back over to you because I know, like me, you probably have a lot to say. So go
No,
ahead.
really, I think you did a nice job of framing the perspective that gets skewed so effectively, truthfully. Um, and you ought to see the amount of people that they parade in the committee meetings. I don't know where they find the people that they bring into that committee hearing, but they pack the room, and there's probably anywhere between 30, 35, 40 people, and they all have a story of how they were mistreated by the system and how they had difficult circumstances and how they all served time and they are now fighting for social justice. And um, it's the system that is to blame for the dysfunction that happens in our society, and that if we could just look the other way, which is exactly what this Bradford bill is asking us to do, just kind of dismiss it, and just let things, if no one dies, it must be okay. I mean, what in the world are we thinking to not take action when there's inappropriate uh, conduct? that there's no form of justice in that kind of mentality. And you mentioned how our society has changed. Both of our fathers are great examples of American success stories. My father started smoking at age 8 because he was starving. His father died when he was very young, and it was from World War II or World War I, actually. That his father developed a respiratory condition that ended his life at a very early age. So my father was basically fatherless most of his life, and so they struggled through a farming background, and he really, really had nothing. And he ended up joining the military, and that's where he found out he actually had science acumen, and he ended up putting himself through school on the GI Bill, and he became a dentist, truthfully, and all on his own. I mean, no government intervention, and that's what he became the first Republican in his family. And not that Republicans have the corner on the market on proper perspective, but I happen to be a Republican myself. Not that that's relevant, but I am in the super minority, and I don't care. I don't care about those. I mean, I do care. I wish that there were more people that shared a more, I don't know, and what I would say healthy perspective. But you know what? It's a lot of the great ideas, not so much in the public safety arena, but a lot of the ideas in our culture have come from the Democratic side. So we're better when we listen to each other instead of fighting and demeaning each other. And they've got so many now that it's like screaming in a church, right? I mean, it's your voice gets pretty loud because you're the only one that's making that chant. And so
Yeah.
that is opportunity that I relish and I'm thankful for. And I try not to be in their face, because then you even have less. Your only hope is to get their ear. And even though they might not act on the words that you express, if you can penetrate them, that's movement. And it might not be seen at that particular point, but eventually it will. And I've been doing this now for 8 years, and I've seen movement. And so I'm thankful for this opportunity. And I think all of us need to be active, active, and don't apologize for something that differs from the other person, even if they try to tear you down. Be strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, you're clearly a leader, and I echo your sentiments about be strong and show some courage. It doesn't take much. You don't have to go out and be uh, uh, a frontline general, but you have to do little things every day to stand up for your values. And you talk about being a Republican. Look, the last Republican my dad voted for was actually President Eisenhower, because President Eisenhower actually integrated armed services. My dad served in a segregated armed services in World War II. And President Eisenhower integrated these services. My dad voted for him. And that was the last Republican that my father voted for. And it was the last Republican that anyone in our immediate family voted for until yours truly in 1984 with President Reagan. And if you can imagine the flack, for lack of a more colorful word, that I got as a 21-year-old. I just missed the 1980 election by actually almost about a year. I was 17. And by the way, I probably would have voted for Jimmy Carter at that point, but that's how much I changed in 4 years. The reason I share this with everyone listening is that right or wrong, you can agree with Democrats, agree with Republicans, or they're wrong, they're right, whatever it is. Point is, if for me, at 21 years old, that took a lot of courage to tell my mother that I was voting for Ronald Reagan. She thought that she had spawned Satan. Okay. And it was not easy. It probably would have been easier changing religions, going from a Methodist to, maybe Judaism or something. My mom probably would have understood that better than me going from supporting Jimmy Carter, which I did as a senior in high school, to now voting for Ronald Reagan. But the reason I did that is because the irony, and this is where people like you really exemplify this, the irony is that the principles my parents taught me to adhere to, taught me to honor, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, those principles didn't change from when I was younger until I was in my, late teens, early 20s, my principles didn't change. It seems to me that the parties changed. And so instead of following a party name, I followed my principles and said, which one of these parties more, by no means perfectly, but which one of these parties more aligns with the principles that I was reared on, that I still hold dear at 21 years old, and I still hold dear at 59 years old. And I had to make, a logical decision. Neither party is perfect, but the Republicans, Ronald Reagan, more aligns to me, Jimmy Carter. So what you're saying is it's not an assault on the Democrat Party, although I'm fine doing that, quite frankly. I'd be honest about it. But what you're talking about is being courageous and standing for what you believe. That's what you're doing. And I couldn't be happier and more grateful that you and others in the legislature, both the assembly and the Senate, are doing that. Whether Democrat or Republican, doing the right thing for public safety. And quite frankly, I haven't seen a lot of Democrats doing that. That's why I'm just not very kind about the party as a whole right now. One of the more thing I'm going to touch on with this, so we can move on to some of our other topics and just kind of get enlightened by your experience as an elected official. But a couple of the bullet points here are under solution. Again, you can all go to Stephen Bradford's website here, representative of the 31st District, Senatorial District here in Southern California. One, eliminating state mandates for school notification of law enforcement, thereby encouraging schools to adopt non-punitive, supportive, trauma-informed. Now, I need someone to explain some of these phrases to me. Trauma-informed and health-based approaches to school-related behavior. That in the vernacular is a lot of, gobble, I can't even say it, a lot of junk. Trauma-informed and health-based approach. I guess, in other words, instead of expelling a kid or actually handcuffing them, taking them off, they want some other more big picture, rounded kind of action. I don't get it. Increasing educator discretion in determining when to notify law enforcement about students' related behaviors. Now, here's how I'm going to hit on this here. Increasing educator discretion in determining when to notify law enforcement about a student's school-related behaviors. Translate, you better not be calling the cops on kids of color. People may think that's pure cynicism. It is not. Whenever you see increasing educator discretion, aka re-educating, this is intimidation. That's what this is. Make no mistake about it. This is a sit teachers down and tell them too many kids of color are being referred to law enforcement. Don't you be one doing it or getting called on it. I know that from the bottom of my soul. That's what.
Well, you as an African American can actually make
what's your
that
take
statement
on that?
Well, I can make
You
it,
can't
but automatically I'm dismissed as a racist, and that's just
That's
the
a good
reality. I
point.
mean,
Well, hey, let me chime in. I am dismissed
Yep.
as an Uncle Tom, a sellout, a house Negro, an Oreo. You name it, I've been called it. And instead of actually dealing with the issues, dealing with the information, making an intelligent, informed rebuttal to the point I make, I get called names. And this is why I have very little patience for the people that somehow you actually deal with, probably on a more cordial basis than I would if I were here in your position. You're a better man than I, because I've been called those names. I've been accused of those types of things simply because I have a dissenting opinion from the
well, it's because they've been very, very effective in doing this canceling thing, because what it does is it displaces the focus on again the messenger and not the message, because they know that the message is toxic and they want to stay away from that, and so they go towards the messenger, and that's a soft target. They can make any allegation, and they do so pretty convincingly in their circles, and that's essentially the world that we're facing today, and that's why there's so much more division than needs be is because of this name calling. This name calling has become a habit by both the left and the right, and it's really divisive, and it really gets away from democratic thinking, in all honesty. And I don't mean that by party; I mean it by the system that we've adopted. And I find it to be very, very hurtful, and it's not only toxic, but it's destroying what we need the most right now, and that is a collective thinking, because that's when we're better, right? I mean, the beauty of America, and has always been the beauty of America, is its multiplicity of thinking, right? Well, so many different cultures, and bringing the good from those cultures and making it into a unified culture, right? That's why it was called the United States of America. When right now, I don't know, it's almost laughable to call us the United States, because we're very divided, more than in my lifetime than I've ever seen. Of course, it was pretty bad in the early 70s, late 60s too, to be truthful. But we're at least as bad as we were then. I find it to be, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up for anybody that has any title and say, let's knock this off, and let's start focusing on what's in common, right? And we're talking about public safety. What's in common is we want to feel safe. We want our kids to feel safe when they're at school. And if we're ignoring these inappropriate behaviors by not bringing in people who have been put in the position to enforce these rules, what in the world are we doing? We're destroying safety.
Well, you put it perfectly. This is one of those very basic common values you would think that two parties in a, I guess, still free society could share. And it's like the Twilight Zone that we're having, this discussion about criminal behavior on a school campus, and why it's a bad thing for having administrators call the cops. Let me ask you this, to kind of put a bow around this particular topic. Can we stop this? Is there anything that we can do, or do you see this actually becoming a law, revising current law, Tom? What do you think?
If I understand it correctly, I think this has gone to the governor's desk, and so he's got until,
I believe so.
what, I think October, to actually sign this into law or actually veto it. We'll see exactly what happens, but I'm pretty sure that this sailed right through. And I don't know. I mean, with the mood of the legislature,
Yeah.
it's time to be careful. And here's another thing: is public schools are really where our culture has developed from decade to decade, and I would like to see that continue. However, some of the public schools have become entrenched in political shaping, and I think that's super dangerous. And that's why there's become competition even in the public arena. And a lot of people are resorting to homeschooling, which I don't think is the most healthy way to go. But parents know best, right? And unfortunately, I think what socialization is as critical as any academic instruction that they get from our instructive system. So I think it's much harder to get that when you homeschool a child, because dealing with difficult people and is a skill that you never get away from. It's just reality. And when you take a child out of that kind of ability to not interact, I think it's a disadvantage to all involved, including our own culture. And plus, the more good examples that are taken out of our general education system, the more difficult it becomes, right? And so I think balance is good, and I think choice is good, because those are two principles that this country has relied upon, and what makes us different from the rest of the world. And I hope that we can all rally around those principles and be strong advocates. And I don't care what party you're from. I really don't. I mean, as a point of interest, I've represented a Democrat dominant district my entire time as a Republican, and it's no secret that I'm a Republican. So I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying what you can do is focus on commonality. Commonality is what wins. And I don't have to be fake. I don't have to betray anything. I just stand up and I say what I think people deserve to hear. And it's unifying. It really is. And so it can happen if we all just are a little more sensitive to people who may not share our perspective. Like even when I spoke to Senator Bradford, I tried to be very respectful, but he turned it on its ear really, really quickly with the Uvalde thing. But sometimes you have to be bold. So it just depends on the discussion point. But I'm very thankful, and I think it's not time to panic as Californians, but it is time to really engage and pay attention.
Well, yeah, I agree with you that engagement is essential. It's essential. Whatever form, staying engaged with people with differing views is essential. I will say this, couple of things on the homeschool. I generally am a big supporter of homeschooling. 'Cause I want people on the podcast to know that even you and I are not
Mhm.
lockstep on everything. But I will agree with you on this. The one aspect of it that I wonder about is the social aspect. I have a lot of friends who homeschool their kids, and they find that socialization through other
Mhm.
methods, through sports, through other clubs, things like that. But I understand that concern. However, I think that homeschooling is, under the current circumstances we're dealing with in public schools, I think it's a really, really good option. The other thing is, I'm a big believer in competition. I think the more pressure that we actually put on public schools to do better, they will. As long as we keep acquiescing to whatever crap they keep teaching our kids and whatever political, positions they
But
keep
Chief,
pushing,
let me
the more
let
they're
me
going
just
to do.
clarify.
When we say
Um,
stop,
I
yeah,
didn't mean to
yeah,
mislead because
hmm
some of the strongest young people I know right now were homeschooled. It is a very successful option, and right
yeah,
now, because of the degree to which there's been indoctrination in our coursework now, that I find it to
right,
be a very viable option. I'm just saying that our culture has always relied on the school system to be the real, I don't know, impetus for cultural values. But now the values are starting to become very objectionable, and so I totally understand and it's really growing, the amount of people that are wanting to do homeschooling, and
yeah,
charter schooling is another great choice, that's publicly funded. I think all these competitive pieces are very much an American thing, and you're right, competition makes us all better, and, I think it's a good option. I just worry about our public schools.
sure. I listen. I understand. I want public schools to succeed. I want them to be a viable, healthy part of our society. They should be. Um, But like you said it very well, that it's up to each parent. And I hope the pushback to some degree makes the schools better, but we shall see. That's a long-term thing. It's been a long-term coming to get where we are now. It won't be an overnight fix, but I hope we get there. Um, the final thing that I'll say about this, I know I said 10 minutes ago, we'll put a ribbon on this, but the irony about this, wait, by the way, not just this SB 1273, but about decarceration, uh, uh, and the reduction in penalties for certain crimes. The sad reality, the sad irony, because most of this is coming from people like Stephen Bradford, these types of different um, philosophies and programs and bills and laws, things like this. But the sad irony is, Representative Lackey, is that the vast majority of people who are victimized are people supposedly being protected by these laws, and that is the Black community, the Hispanic community. It's disproportionately affecting, in other words, criminals being released early, criminals not being arrested, criminals not being prosecuted, criminals not being held accountable, right? Criminals not being incarcerated for proper length for the given crime. They go back to the communities where they came from. That's just
Mhm.
whether you're white, black, wherever you live. But these people are not coming out of Brentwood. They're not coming out of Fair Oaks. They're not coming out of, Marin County. They're coming out of the place where I grew up, Imperial and Avalon, Southeast Los Angeles, in the 1960s. They're coming out of these places that are already overburdened with crime. And they're going to go back, or they're going to stay there if they're let out early, or if they're not prosecuted and arrested in the first place. So the people that you purport to help are being disproportionately negatively affected by these silly, ridiculous bills and laws that are being passed in the state. And it's an absolute travesty by the people who are supposed to be advocates for people of color. I find it ironic and sad. So we could talk about this all night, but I think that, together, you and I have kind of made a point on that one. What is your outlook for the legislature? Tom, what's your outlook for the political process in the state? Is California going to stay in this, again, super majority run configuration for the rest of our lives, or do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for at least
I
some
think
real balance?
will rebound slowly. It's going to be very slowly, and unfortunately, there's going to be needless tragedy along the way. It's just what we've allowed to happen. And I think what's happening is I guarantee you there are people listening to this podcast that also know many people that they have decided to leave the state, right? Especially though many of our retired friends have decided that it's time that California is becoming very, very discouraging. It's the cost of living is much higher. The safety piece is starting to erode, and there's too many good choices out there. But I do think that if those of us who know and understand the value of winning principles and the value system that we all deserve to win from, we can make an impact, and we can start to make it to improve. And that's what has to happen. I'm not saying it will happen. It'll only happen if those of us who share these perspectives get engaged, right? I mean, I'm a highway patrolman by my life definition, and not a legislator. It's really quite alarming that I'm in the legislature. It's quite a weird set of circumstances, but I will tell you that it's because I feel passionately about staying engaged. And you don't have to be a legislator to be impactful. There's, especially in your local communities, there's much opportunity to be involved in school board decisions, and even water board decisions, or some kind of there's hospital boards, there's city councils, and there's all sorts of opportunity to be engaged. And I hope that those of us who share these values, part of your Leo Nation, would speak up and get active, because really that's what makes the difference, and that's really how you fix screwed up values, right? And things are goofy. Things are really, really goofy, and there's a lot of confused people, and they might not totally admit it, but a lot of people are very unprincipled right now, and they just don't know where they are. And so we need to help them understand that, and understand the benefit of making good choices and supporting the right things.
Man, you said it. You said it well. Doesn't matter who you are, what your walk of life is, you can always make an impact. And going back to what you said earlier about engaging people. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for you out there listening, what the representative just said is so true. Take some action. Don't be a victim. Don't complain unless you're willing to go out there and do something, whatever it is. The action's up to you, but do something positive. If you're donating $5 to a particular candidate, if you are commenting on social media in support of a principle, a bill, whatever it is, but be a part of the process. We can all complain about it, and God knows that I do probably too often, but I'm also doing something, this for your Leo Nation, to try to actually turn the tide, stem the tide against law enforcement. We all don't have to do this, but we can all do something. And like the representative said, it's up to us. You be your own engine of change. It can be one person at a time. It can be one step at a time. but there are 40 million people in the state, and really just a very, very small percentage do something. We can actually, make big waves in a positive way. I believe that. Um, Representative Lackey, I know you are up for election. I know you have your beloved 36th district that you represent. You said you've been there 8 years, and I'm very happy for the people that you represent. And I've been looking at your website, and there is someone here who I don't know personally, but I know through reputation, State Senator Melissa Melendez, and she has endorsed you. She's actually, yeah, she has endorsed you.
That'll be
Actually,
the
you're
new district.
District
I'm
34,
currently
right? I
36,
said
but they
36.
redistricted our area, so we will be
It will be
34.
36. Okay. All right. Because you know what? When I run out of toes and fingers, my numbers go out the window. So, but I'm glad I got that one somewhat right. But let me just read to the audience what Senator Melendez said in her endorsement of you. It says that in announcing her support for Lackey, Senator Melendez stated, "There is no other candidate who more deeply understands how important it is to protect the public. Where other candidates do a lot of talking about what they protect, how they protect the public, if only you'd elect them. Tom wore the uniform for 28 years because he believed in the cause, not the applause. I respect him. And most importantly, I trust him." Senator Melendez she is a stalwart. She's been a warrior like you have, and to give an endorsement like that is she really hits on the public safety aspect and the fact that you understand this. And God knows you do from 3 decades of law enforcement with the CHP. I think it's a resounding endorsement. For what it's worth, you're getting my endorsement. Chief Mark Garrett, retired California Highway Patrol, and we need more people like you and in-state government and government in general. So, with that, I would like to give you the last word. Anything else you'd like to talk about, and certainly you tell people where they can go to drop a few shekels in the box there.
All right. Well, let me
support your
just say that
campaign.
it's been a pleasure spending a few minutes here discussing some of these really powerful issues. Truthfully, I mean, this is how it works. The system takes it bit by bit by bit, and this bill that Mr. Bradford pushed is pushed in the wrong direction. So, those of us who are of the mindset that understand that the rule of law deserves to be protected, and that we need to try to prevent victims. This kind of policy does just the opposite, and it creates a free for all for victims in the school system. So I'm very, very proud to have a chance to speak to these issues, and it's still kind of weird for me to imagine that I'm in the state legislature because of I'm not wealthy. I really am not what a lot of politicians think they are. I'm just a person that a regular walk of life individual, just like everybody that's listening to this podcast, with great opportunity, and I've had great influencers that have taken interest in trying to allow me to hold office. But what I'm hoping everybody understands is that change comes slow, especially in a big circle. But you can have effective change in smaller circles immediately. And so that's how it grows. It starts out small and it grows just like a plant, just like a human being. And I hope that all of you will be proud and understand and be tasteful in the way that you push for change, because we can make it happen and we need to make it happen. And if you believe in what I believe in, and you're a Leo Nation individual, I guarantee you we're like-minded. And you can go to my website, lackeyforassembly.com, and find out more. And if you feel compelled to give me a couple bucks, we're going to need it, because my opponent claims to be a law enforcement dude, and he's also a Republican, so it makes it very awkward. But he's just a much different kind of guy. And I have 4 years left if I can get the votes, and I hope to do so. And thank you for allowing me on here. Chief. It was an honor, and I'm thankful that you gave me a chance to express some opinions.
Well, Representative Tom Lackey, it was our honor as well. Thank you for giving us the time, the insight, and really kind of a look into what happens up there in Sacramento. God bless you. Best of luck to you, and I look forward to talking with you in the future. Thanks for fighting for law-abiding and law-loving people in California. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that brings this episode to an end. It's been a lot of fun. Remember, right there over my shoulder, Your Leo Nation. Visit us at yourleonation.org. On that website, obviously, you can click on the listen now to get all of our podcasts whenever you like. And also, if you click on the donate button, that will take you to the Leo Project, our nonprofit partner for Your Leo Nation. Just click on the donate button. We are making every effort to donate to the families of fallen law enforcement officers, not only here in California, but across the nation. So God bless everybody listening. Tom, we'll be in touch. Have a great night.